Well, thank you so much for being here with me, Tiffany. I'm so excited to get to interview you and, of course, continue to bring more awareness to the Texas State Board of Education, candidates, and the office as a whole. This race definitely doesn't get the attention that it deserves, but I know that all of you, all 8 of you, are working so hard to get your name out there. And I'm so glad that I can use my platform to help you and all the candidates do that. So thank you for coming today.
Yeah, thank you.
So first question, just getting started. Tell us, who you are, your name, your office that you're running for, and then why exactly this specific office? Why did you want to run for the State Board of Education?
So my name's Tiffany Perkins. I am a mom of 6, a lifelong Texan here in the Southeast Texas area of Jefferson County. And I'm a teacher of 12 years. So my whole adult life, I have been in education. I got my bachelor's degree in English, my master's in English, and then I got my master's in educational administration. So I'm not a politician. And I know that that's something that we hear a lot this particular election cycle. There's a lot of people running for office, I feel like, that are saying, like, I'm not a politician, but things needed to change. And so that's kind of my story. I'm a teacher, and a lot of people on the State Board of Education, including the incumbent that I'm hoping to unseat, are not teachers, and they're making decisions about education. So me and the other Democrats who are running for the State Board of Education, there is 8 of us. We're all teachers. So I think that that's important to put educators back in charge of education. That's what's on my campaign signs, trusting education to the educators.
Yeah. So, it obviously makes sense that you would choose this office, but anything else in particular that made you draw specifically to this office?
So I think I started really paying attention to it probably around last November. Around last November, I made the decision to leave the classroom to work from home and tutor because I have 2 little ones. So I have 6 kids. My oldest are teenagers, but I also have 2 little ones. And so, as a mom of little ones, it's just helpful to be able to make your own schedule and work from home. But that also allowed me time to kind of see what's going on. That a lot of times, one of the kind of, ironies of being a classroom teacher is that you're so busy focusing on your students and your classroom and all the things that go into that, you don't necessarily have time to dig into educational policy. But then I start paying attention to what's going on in the news. And the first really article that got my eye was a Texas Tribune article about the social studies revamp. So this had already been going on for, a couple of State Board of Education meetings at this point. It started in 2025. And I think this was about November of 2025 when I was seeing, a lot of people were upset. So I started digging into what was going on and seeing that they're looking to overhaul. The word I would actually use is upend, I think is a more accurate word, the entire curriculum in a way that is pushing a very particular white Christian nationalist agenda, erasing history, erasing people from history and their stories, and just, what we've come to expect out of the administration top down, nationally top down. And knowing that if this is starting here in Texas, it's not going to stop in Texas. It's going to spread. And so, they kind of looked in, well, who is in the State Board of Education? Well, that seat's coming up for an election. And so then I just kind of did it. I decided, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run for this position and, start something where we put educators back in charge. And in doing so, I've met, the other candidates who are also running and also kind of have similar stories as mine. Like, we're going to fix this. And one of the people running is a government teacher and I'm an English teacher. So, we all kind of have similar stories in that regard.
Yeah, it just makes sense. And I've had the pleasure I met you at the beginning of this journey before you had even stepped into this candidacy. And so that's just been really cool to see, just talking to you beforehand as, content creator, and then seeing that transition for you deciding I'm actually going to run for this office and just being so excited for you and just watching you on this grand adventure that you're on. And I'm just so glad that you showed up to do it because, of course, it just makes perfect sense. And you are such a great fit for this role. So thank you for stepping into that for sure. So let's talk about more specifically the office of the State Board of Education. A lot of people don't have any idea what it is, what they do. And there's a lot of confusion between, the school board at your local school versus the State Board of Education, 2 completely separate entities. and their roles. So let's talk about what the State Board of Education actually does.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. My husband and I joke that on the campaign trail, we spend so much time telling people what the office even is before we even get to meet. Because as a teacher, that's what I do. I teach. So I get to, tell the people I'm campaigning what this role is. Because like you said, a lot of people be like, oh, you're running for school board. And so, so here's the big difference. School boards govern local independent school districts, the financials and all of those things. But the State Board of Education is a little different. Well, it's different in a lot of ways, but really the particular way it's different is that it focuses on curriculum and instructional standards. So on the State Board of Education, there are 15 members. So that's an odd number and allows for, a vote that when they vote on things. And the 15 members represent different regions of Texas. So for example, District 7, where I live, has 11 counties. And so that would be like Jefferson County. My 4 biggest counties are Jefferson, Brazoria, Galveston, Fort Bend. Other districts have even more counties, especially up there in the Panhandle where there's, more land. So, Texas is a big state. You only have 15 members. That's really not that many. So it's almost like the guy who's running for state senator, Bobby Tillman, where I live, he's running for state Senate seat and he has 18 counties. I have 11. So you can kind of compare how much we cover. But then there's 3 main roles that the State Board of Education does. And really what it comes down to is the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So drafting those standards and working with educators to draft those standards. And then approving instructional materials that can be adopted using state funds. So if the State Board of Education approves instructional materials, whether it's a digital product or a textbook company, then now districts can use state funds to purchase, that textbook. And then the third thing is the Permanent School Fund, which is an endowment built into Texas, going back generations of Texans based on oil and gas revenue. So in that way, the land commissioner position, I believe that's Ben Flores he's our nominee for land commissioner. There's a lot of crossover with that role because of the Permanent School Fund.
Yeah.
And so those are the 3 main roles of the State Board of Education. Personally, what I focus on the most as an educator, and as an English teacher that, has spent years, when I taught English, I had to teach based on the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. That's what determines what's going to be in the textbooks. It's what determines what's going to be on the state tests. And also what's interesting is that because Texas is such a big market for textbooks, we're a big state, the standards that we have wind up getting spread beyond, right? Beyond just Texas. So it's these 15 members that get overlooked because they're so down ballot have a lot more, I would say, power. I don't like to use that word because it should be public service, not power. But in terms of deciding things for many people, they have more power than people would expect. And there's people that are in those positions right now that are using that power, I would say, incorrectly for bad agendas. So that's why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to my point that, not only do people not necessarily understand or know what this office does, they also don't realize how they're affected by it. What would you say some of those, you've kind of answered some of it, but just getting a little bit deeper into so people really understand how they're affected by the decisions that these State Board of Educators are making, especially with what's going on now.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you one example that's kind of like a scenario that would happen if, so the standards that they passed in June, they would go into effect in 2030. Now, some of those things we plan to undo when we swear in the new board. But let's just, for the sake of this hypothetical scenario, to paint a picture, one of the standards that they passed when they went line by line in social studies in June, when they were voting on the social studies standards, I think it was U.S. history. I don't recall the grade, but either middle school or high school. And one of the more extreme right-wing members of the board suggested a standard, and it did get voted on party lines. So that would be 10-5 with the current makeup of the State Board of Education. A standard for history that said, so they took out, first of all, they took out the standard that was previously written about Joe McCarthy and the overreach of McCarthyism, which that's an important thing for kids to learn, I would say, especially since we're kind of seeing history repeat a little bit. But, of course, that was intentional. They took that out. And then they replaced the teaching of that era, which would be the Cold War, era. The student will evaluate the negative effects of the counterculture movement of the 60s and 70s, especially with regard to the divorce rate. And it just kind of went into painting divorce as no-fault divorce and the passage of no-fault divorce as a negative. So to answer your question on how that would affect, say you're a parent and your kid goes to school and their teacher tells them, to evaluate the negative effects of divorce. Well, maybe you're a mom and you're divorced for a very good reason. Maybe you were married to, not a safe person, right? And so you're rightfully upset. Why is my teacher, and you're not paying attention to education politics, let's say. You're doing your thing because you can't pay attention to everything all the time. And so you reach out to the teacher and the principal. Well, that's what's in the textbook. Well, why is it in the textbook? Well, because that's what's in the TEKS. Well, why is it in the TEKS? Because it was passed on party lines by the State Board of Education at the June 2026 meeting. And so then it's not the teacher's fault. It's not the principal's fault. It's not even the school board's fault. The teacher has to teach that. And so now, because this is 5.5 million Texas students, you see how people with bad intentions can use education and use the curriculum as sort of a playground to push their ideas, even if their ideas are outdated or if they're just plainly bigoted. Like what we're seeing now, they're using social studies to push very anti-Muslim ideas.
Mm-hmm.
We serve a lot of Muslim students, and what they're pushing in there would be really harmful for these kids. So that's another thing.
Right. One of so many. And it's so important to bring more awareness to this office because it's important for people to start connecting those dots and paying attention, being more proactive and preventative rather than just waiting until something happens. Because by then it's usually too late. You discover something that's happening and it's already been voted on and it is until the next time. So
and then people get upset and they want to start. And I mean, I'm glad people do pay attention at some point. But the goal, I think for all of us, and I'm talking to myself here too, because I feel like I breathed a sigh of relief when Joe Biden won the presidential election in 2021. And in that time, took a kind of political break, a political mental health break, but they didn't. They planned their comeback. And in doing so, that's how my opponent, who is a January 6er, actually got on the State Board of Education. She was voted off her local school board for participating in January 6th, and then subsequently got voted on. And that was an election cycle where MAGA was emboldened. And the rest of us kind of pulled back a little because we were kind of, again, breathing a collective sigh of relief at adults being back in the room. So that's something that I've kind of am learning. Like we can't ever take our foot off the gas because
no, definitely not. It's good to take a moment of a breath, but that's all you get. You get like a moment and we got to get back to it.
Stay on your alert. Yeah.
Because you never know what your opponent's doing. So let's talk about, and you mentioned this earlier about how our 8 Democratic candidates are educators. They have education background, and that is not seen often enough. We have teachers that are in the classroom, they're professors, they're curriculum experts, people who have actually worked with students. Imagine that for the State Board of Education. People who are making decisions about students are people who have actually worked for students. So let's talk a little bit about that, how that came to be, or just the greatness of that.
Well, I think what it is that I'm seeing and that I appreciate, and of course, I'm not going to assume to speak for the other candidates, but just for where I'm standing, is we're pushing back, I think, against the anti-intellectual culture, because for so long, teachers have been demonized. Going back to McCarthyism and even further back, I mean, you go to any point in history where authoritarians are in control or are emboldened, and who they go after first? It's usually the academics, the professors, and in addition to other professions like we saw with Dr. Fauci, the scientists and things like that. But for sure, educators have been under attack for quite some time in this rise of anti-intellectualism, disregarding the experts, etc. And so with that, and then I think it also ties into teaching being a predominantly female-dominated profession. I think that's a part of it too. It's just, kind of the lack of respect for the profession in general. So you see teachers being scapegoated and you see teachers being accused of quote unquote indoctrinating kids when all we're doing is reading books with kids that expose them to other ways of life and, open the door to empathy. And anyway, so teachers have been kind of targeted in that way. Right. So now you have people that are trying to get into education positions who are not educators because they've kind of pit, I feel like, teachers and parents against each other, because on the right wing side, you have, their talking points are parental rights. Well, I'm a teacher and I'm a mom of 6. All of my kids are public school students, except for the 2 youngest ones who will be public school students. Most teachers, I would say, are parents or have kids in their lives in some capacity. So it's not this competition that they've made it out to be. So I think having all 8 of us running for the State Board of Education, being educators, is kind of taking back that power. The education profession belongs to educators. We are the experts in the field. We're content area experts in whatever our subject is. For me, that's English language arts. And we're experts in pedagogy and in all of those things. And currently the makeup of the State Board of Education, and I'm looking at the sitting members and also some of the candidates running on the Republican side. You have people that are associated with groups like Moms for Liberty. Of course, again, nothing wrong with being an involved parent. I am one, but not an educator. In addition, you have people who are pastors and they call themselves education reformers. Well, to me, that sounds like indoctrinating kids. That sounds like every accusation is a confession. You have people who are business owners. What is it? The education commissioner, Mike Morath, he's a software developer. And that's why Gina has said day one, we fire Mike Morath and put an educator in that position. Because to me, it's just common sense. The education commissioner should be an educator. The State Board of Education should be comprised of educators. Again, when you run for a judicial seat, they usually expect you to have some background in law, right? What's the difference? Just because you were a student at one time doesn't mean you're an expert in education. Just like I'm not a doctor because I've been a patient. So very long answer to that. I feel like I went off on a rant, but I think that it shows that educators are stepping back into our position of expertise and taking back the field.
Yeah, very, very well said. Thank you. That certainly explains it and was everything that I needed from that answer. Thank you for saying all of the things that our audience needs to hear for sure. So now let's talk about some of, the issues that you're hearing. You've been campaigning for quite some time now, traveling around into your different counties. What are some concerns that you're hearing from parents and educators that keep coming up?
Oh, wow. So there's a lot. So I would say that when it comes to concerns about parents and community, what I tell people is that there's kind of 2 things happening concurrently in the world of education. And even though they seem separate, they collide, they're connected. So most parents and community members that aren't involved in education policy, they're not really paying attention to what's going on at the State Board of Education unless it makes headlines, like what we saw with the Bible verse, and the social studies stuff and the Bible passages and all of that. But what they are being affected by in real time is school closures, schools being underfunded, and some districts being taken over by TEA. So all of these things kind of collectively fall in the category of education being dismantled. Sounds like a really dramatic word, but that is the word, I think. It's being taken apart and sold for parts, so to speak. You have Greg Abbott, who was paid $12 million by Pennsylvania billionaire Jeff Yates to promote his voucher scheme. So now we're offering money, taxpayer dollars, taken out of public schools to go into the private market. And in doing that, you have people, and then that combined with things like TEA takeovers, where in 2015, they changed the law that one failing campus can lead to a takeover, not the whole district, just one failing campus. So TEA takes over, destabilizes the district. And then all these other things just kind of happen that destabilize districts that are usually tied back to underfunding. You have chronic absenteeism because of social issues. Well, then that leads to schools not being funded, because in Texas, we're one of the few states that fund based on average daily attendance instead of average net enrollment. So all of these things collectively destabilize public schools. It leads to families leaving, going to the private market, teachers leaving, schools close. So when a school closes, the community feels that effect in real time, because public schools are community hubs. They're vital local infrastructure. And so people are worried about this also because if you are a parent, say, of a student with disabilities, private schools don't have to service you. They don't, even charter schools, they can choose their student makeup. And so then those parents, what are they to do? Because public schools, that's the beauty of public schools, is they serve every child. So when I said that these things are kind of 2 separate things happening, we have the curriculum issues at the State Board of Education, then we have the destabilization of public schools. But I think it's ultimately connected because it's all part of this broader plan to, one, push Christian nationalism into our education system and to privatize the education system. And in that way, I would say that public education in Texas is definitely under attack. And that's why, I know I'm up here as a candidate speaking about my candidacy, but it all goes back to the office of the governor. The governor appoints the education commissioner. The quickest way to fix this is to get a new governor who can appoint a new education commissioner.
Yes.
And have a new State Board of Education that can make our curriculum religiously neutral and politically neutral as it should be, not telling students what to think, but teaching them how to think. So 2 big fires in the world of education that are seemingly separate but connected, I feel.
Very much so. And hoping to bring more awareness to that. It's all connected. So many of these, from the top to the bottom, they're all connected in some way. And that's why there's no one that's more important than the other. And it's so important to vote all the way down the ballot from beginning to the end. Why would you have a test in front of you and only answer the first 2 questions? Go in there and answer every single question down ballot, because they are all equally important. It's not, they're not ranked by who's more important than the other. That's just, I don't know how they separate them exactly, but there's no level of importance based on how they're positioned on that ballot.
Right.
They're all equally important. Just doing.
My husband actually made the suggestion recently. We were talking about the same thing, that maybe we should change it so that it goes in the opposite direction. Where the top of the
governor
ticket,
at the end.
to get to the governor, to get to the Senate, you have to go past all of the...
Yeah, just jumble them all up. Put them in.
Yes. There you go. Jumble it up.
Yeah. You just never know what people are thinking, but it's just so important to emphasize, voting all the way down the ticket. There's just no reason not to.
And the I'd say the further down the ballot, the more it's likely to affect your life. I hear people already talking about the presidential pick for 2028, and we're not even past the midterms. And I'm like,
I don't even want to hear it. Not even trying to hear it. Keep scrolling. Yeah, I can't even.
The president is important, obviously, but it doesn't affect your daily life in the same way. So,
right. And he's not on the ballot right now. So
exactly,
we're not even there.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about the motto that I've been seeing go around from all the candidates, which is hold 5, flip 3 on the SBOE. So share what that means to people who have never heard it before so that they can understand that.
So like I said earlier, there's 15 seats on the State Board of Education. And those 15 people are voting on things, like I said, the TEKS, the standards. I mean, sometimes they're going line by line and voting on specific standards. So right now, the makeup of the State Board of Education is 10 Republicans and 5 Democrats. Mm-hmm. So the math then is that we want a majority. We want a majority to be able to vote to undo these things that are harmful that were passed in June. And so to do that, we need at least 8 to 7. So we already have the 5 Democrats, right? That's where hold 5 comes from. Now we only have two Democrat seats that are needing to be actually held right now. So that makes it pretty easy. 3 Democrat seats are not up for re-election. They're safe. So when we say hold 5, it's really actually, we only have to worry about 2. And they're pretty safe areas. One is Dr. Tiffany Clark, who is an incumbent, and the other is Allison Bush, the Democrat in that area. That's the Austin area. And the Democrat in that seat is not seeking re-election. So this is still a hold seat. And then we have 6 people running to flip Republican seats, whether they're running like myself to unseat an incumbent, or whether it's a traditionally Republican seat, but the incumbent is not seeking re-election, so they're running against a new Republican. But regardless, we have 6 people running. That's 6 possible ways to flip Republican seats. We only need to flip 3. Now, I'd love for us to flip all 6. That would be ideal. But just for the sake of math, to kind of give people a visual of the what we need, and to show people how close we are. We only need to flip 3 to get to that majority. And that is so doable. Because when we talk about, what do we need to flip the House? Well, I think it's 14. What do we need to flip the state Senate? I think we need 5. The State Board of Education is 3. We only need to flip 3. And so hold 5, flip 3. Now, when I say that, some people say, well, what about flip all 6? Absolutely. I'd love that. But I want people to see the math. 5 and 3 is the 8 to 7 we need. So hold 5, flip 3.
Yeah, at minimum, flip 3.
Yes.
But if we can get to 6, let's get to 6.
Yes.
For sure. Okay, my final question is, if someone who was watching this video and say they've never paid attention, or maybe they're just starting a little bit, kind of, to pay attention to the State Board of Education, what is one reason that they should start now? And we've already kind of covered a lot, but really just to pinpoint it, why should they start now?
I think we're in a very crucial moment in our nation's history where we're seeing kind of an uprising of white supremacy, of white Christian nationalism. And I want to clarify, I am a Christian. I make a difference between Christianity following the teachings of Christ and Christian nationalism, which is a political movement meant to infuse their version of Christianity into our laws. And so we're seeing this in all aspects of law and government in the federal level and at the state level throughout all the states. But education is where I'm focused, and education is where it becomes generational. They're doing this Christian nationalist attempt into our education to attempt to secure their ideology into generations, and also to kind of keep people ignorant of the truth, because ignorant people, and when I say ignorant, I don't mean that as a derogatory, I mean literally not knowing things, not having been taught something about our nation's history or about critical thinking. Those people are easier to manipulate. And we know that for a lot of politicians on the right, manipulation is a tactic that is very much used. And so, there's just so many quotes that I can point to as an educator. One of my favorites is Nelson Mandela: "Education is the greatest weapon which we have to change the world." And that is so true. And the thing is, they know it's true also. So we have to fight back. And I think that we all want to live in a society where people are, well-read, or at least where they have the literacy skills, the comprehension skills, the critical thinking skills. And it's just so important that we preserve that, because it is very much under attack right now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for showing up and talking to us today. Tell our audience, where they can find you. I'll be sure to put your socials and your website, all your information on the screen here, but let them know where they can find you.
Yeah. And one more thing before I do that, if it's okay, I would love to tell the audience that we have another State Board of Education meeting coming up in September, or really August 31st through September 4th is the next SBOE week. And when we have that week, what they're going to be voting on is the high school social studies. So they actually did not get to that at the last meet. They voted on K through 8, but they ran out of time. They're going to be voting on high school social studies. High school social studies is where some of the most bigoted and just really awful standards that they're trying to push through are in the high school TEK. So I would really love if people could mark their calendars to show up in Austin, give public comment that week. Usually it's the Monday, so that would be August 31st, possibly the Tuesday. The agenda's not out yet, but traditionally it's Monday. That would be August 31st. And then, yes, on social media, I'm on Instagram and Threads at Perkins 4TX SBOE7. I'm very active on Threads just because I feel like I'm better as a writer than I am with videos. So I'm very active on Threads, but I do post reels on Instagram and also on TikTok. On TikTok, it's just my name, Tiffany Perkins, and I'm on Facebook. So I'm pretty much on all of the social apps except X. I don't care for X.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, yeah. But during SBOE week, I really update on Threads in real time at the meetings to let everybody know what is going on. So to kind of try to do that live time reporting. So
awesome. Well, thank you again so much. Make sure, everybody, that you're following Tiffany, even if she is not your district representative, follow them anyway. We need to bring more awareness to this office. And I'll be putting all 8 candidates, their information linked in here, so you can be sure to follow them. And if you have any questions about who represents you, be sure to comment and we will help you figure that out. Thank you again, Tiffany, so much. I really appreciate you.
You as well. Thank you so much, Heather. Bye.